Tonight on Reporting Scotland. A former resident of the Sisters of Nazareth care home says he was forced to migrate to Australia aged 11.
We're basically taught my mother doesn't want me, which was true. My mother doesn't want me, my country doesn't want you, and you're garbage.
Also in the programme. 2 years after this student took her own life, new guidelines to help universities tackle sexual violence. Theresa May urges the Scottish Government to rethink their position on Brexit. Scottish Athletics ask for answers about the management of the Gold Coast Marathon following the collapse of Callum Hawkins. And one of the Red Arrow's iconic Hawk jets makes its final landing at Scotland's National Museum of Flight. Good evening. A nun told a boy, "Your family doesn't want you, your country doesn't want you." She informed him he was to be sent from Scotland to Australia. That was a testimony today of Christopher Booth, now aged 77, to the Scottish Child Abuse Inquiry. He said he was taken from a children's home in Aberdeen in a move that had robbed him of his childhood. Joanne Macaulay reports.
Christopher Booth is back living in Scotland now, having spent over 40 years in Australia. In the early 1950s, he was living in the Catholic care home Nazareth House in Aberdeen. He told the inquiry there were regular thrashings with canes at the hands of nuns and children were force-fed. But after a few months there, he said he was told by one of the nuns that he was going to Australia, aged 11. This is what he said outside the inquiry.
As I said told the committee was that we're basically taught my mother doesn't want me, which was true. My mother doesn't want me, my country doesn't want you, and you're garbage. So we're sending out, as I said to the inquiry, from the day I was put into Nazareth House, they must have started the process of sending me to Australia.
Christopher Booth told the inquiry he'd never been shown where Australia was on a map, but he was placed in a Catholic home run by priests and brothers in Tasmania, and that's when the sexual abuse began.
It made me feel really bad. I felt, like I couldn't tell anybody. I felt ashamed, of what was happening to me. I couldn't explain it. You can't explain it to people. See, it's still with me now.
Christopher Booth said that when an aunt in Aberdeen heard about the plans to send him to Australia, she went to Nazareth House to complain about it. He said for that intervention, he got a thrashing. He told the inquiry that later in life, when he asked his mother about him being sent to Australia, she told him that she hadn't agreed to it.
Christopher Booth told the inquiry how much he'd lost by going to Australia.
I had no opportunity of mixing with my siblings, right? I don't mix with them now because I'm basically the skeleton in the cupboard. So I've lost all of that. I don't have any contact with any of my relatives. I've probably got loads of relatives in this country, but I don't know where they are.
Christopher Booth told the inquiry he hoped it would ensure that no other child was subjected to what they'd been through. Joanne Macaulay, Reporting Scotland, Edinburgh.
Universities and colleges are being given new guidelines on how to help students who've suffered sexual violence or harassment. It follows a campaign by the parents of a student who took her own life after she'd been in an abusive relationship. The Scottish Government says staff and students must have the confidence to report unacceptable behaviour. Here's our education correspondent, Jamie McIver.
Emily Drury had a happy childhood and her whole life to look forward to. Aged 17, she started a law degree, but she ended up in an abusive relationship with another student and went on to take her own life.
We didn't know she was in a relationship with the abuser, and when we found out what happened later.
Friends were starting to see signs. They had seen aggression, they had seen signs she had been abused, and they'd seen marks on her and things, but Emily didn't really disclose or share that with her close friends, and indeed we knew nothing about that until we lost her.
The Druys have been campaigning for more help for students in similar situations. Now this has led to government action. Universities will have to develop strategies and give guidance and training to staff. They'll also need to ensure students know how to get help. There's £400,000 of government money to help them do this.
This toolkit needs to be adopted by every single university and college, and we'll be ensuring that that happens and that it ends up making a real difference to the students and the staff on the ground.
The new guidance builds on work done at Strathclyde University. They have a specialist on campus who can offer help and support.
Students can come to me for specific support around anything to do with sexual violence, whether it's happened to them or someone that they know. And the support can range from like having a one-off session where they want to ask some questions, or longer term support if that's what's needed.
As the project went on, it became apparent that many students had been seeking help, but gone to charities or helplines away from the campus.
Before this, we had our policies and procedures, and we relied on individuals to report what was happening. And we then discovered through engaging with the Glasgow and Clyde Rape Crisis Centre that numbers of students from across the whole of the city have been coming here over the years to get support, and we didn't know anything about it.
Sexual violence and harassment is an issue for society as a whole. Universities can help tackle the problem, but won't solve it alone.
We need to break the taboo of mental health and abuse. Universities need to take responsibility in openly talking about these things.
Jamie McIver, reporting Scotland.
2 men have gone on trial accused of murdering a man while he was sitting in his car. Ewan Johnson died in 2016 after he was shot in the head. Anthony Ruthven and David Scott deny murder. Katrina Renton reports.
It was here on the south side of Glasgow where Ewan Johnson was found unconscious in his car on the night of the 15th of November 2016. Rustan Sadiq is a taxi driver. He had been out with his friend. They had been driving in the area when they saw a blue car. He said it pulled out in front of them at high speed, went through red lights and headed into this road. Mr. Sadiq said, "I heard 2 bangs. I did say to my friend, it sounds like gunshots, but wasn't sure." He said the blue car sped off while another car crashed into barriers. He said his friend called the ambulance and police. David O'Hara also gave evidence. He is a paramedic with 30 years' experience. The court heard his ambulance was at the scene just after midnight.
He said there were several people, civilians and police officers around the car, and the passenger door was open. He said the man in the passenger seat told him the name of the man in the driver's seat was Ewan, and he appeared to be slumped towards the steering wheel. David O'Hara said he briefly examined Ewan Johnson, but quickly came to the conclusion that he had suffered a catastrophic head injury. He said he moved him into the ambulance and drove off for the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital.
Mr. O'Hara said he learned that Ewan Johnson did not survive his injuries. Anthony Ruthven and David Scott both deny repeatedly discharging a firearm and repeatedly shooting Ewan Johnson in the head and murdering him. The trial at the High Court in Glasgow continues. Katrina Renton, reporting Scotland.
Legislation will be passed later this evening, setting the new minimum unit price for alcohol at 50 pence. The law will come into force on Tuesday and will increase the price of cheap beers, ciders and supermarket-owned brand spirits. The idea of a minimum unit price to address public health concerns was first proposed by the SNP government in 2009, but it hasn't been introduced until now because of legal challenges from the Scotch Whisky Association. A man has appeared in court charged with murdering a woman from Glasgow. 47-year-old Julie Riley hasn't been seen since the middle of February and was reported missing when she failed to turn up for routine appointments. 41-year-old Andrew Wallace is also charged with attempting to defeat the ends of justice. He made no plea or declaration and was remanded in custody. Plans for all sports coaches working with children and other vulnerable groups in Scotland to submit to mandatory checks have gone out to public consultation. They follow allegations of historical child sexual abuse in football. The Childcare and Early Years Minister, Marie Todd, said the proposals would allow Disclosure Scotland to improve, simplify and modernise its services while ensuring the best possible protection. The Prime Minister has called on the Scottish Government to rethink its rejection of proposed changes to Brexit legislation. Scottish ministers say amendments to the withdrawal bill don't go far enough and could see their powers limited for up to 7 years. But the Prime Minister insists the offer respects devolution. Our political correspondent Nick Ardley has the story.
the management of fisheries, the welfare of animals, and elements of agriculture. Some of the areas where EU rules are in place at the moment, powers which will be coming back after Brexit. The UK government wants common rules to stay in place to protect trade across the UK, and today it published its proposals for how that should happen. Most powers in devolved areas would automatically go to Holyrood, but in 24 areas, current rules could be frozen. A sunset clause means that wouldn't last longer than 7 years, but it would mean the Scottish Government can't change the law in those areas, despite them being devolved. A decision on that wouldn't normally happen without Holyrood's backing, but ultimately the UK Parliament could overrule the Scottish one. The Prime Minister said today that does respect devolution and urged the Scottish Government to rethink its rejection of the proposals.
We've made considerable changes to the bill to reflect issues raised by members and by the devolved administrations. It is indeed disappointing that the Scottish Government have not yet felt able to add their agreement to the new amendments, and we sincerely hope that they will reconsider their position.
And in the Welsh Assembly, Wales's Finance Secretary said the deal soundly defended devolved interests.
It has meant compromise on both sides. That is the art of negotiation. And I believe the outcome is a mature agreement between governments which is respectful.
But Scottish ministers say the changes don't go far enough. They say they won't accept restrictions to their powers without consent. And SNP MPs are critical of the Welsh Government's decision.
But it comes as no surprise to us, Mr Speaker, that Welsh Labour have so easily capitulated to the Tories on this particular issue. We will never stop defending the integrity of our Parliament, and we will never allow the Tories to diminish our Parliament's powers.
Is a deal still possible? Yes. But it's hard to see what could happen in the next few weeks that hasn't happened in the months of talks already. It's hard to see the UK Government changing its mind on the Scottish Government's solutions, and it's hard to see the Scottish Government now accepting the UK Government proposal that it's already rejected. As one Whitehall source said to me tonight, there's minimal wriggle room left. But that's still better than none. So for now, this negotiation goes on. Nick Eardley reporting Scotland, Westminster.
Well, let's see if we can find out any more. Our political editor, Brian Taylor, is at the Scottish Parliament. Brian, what has the Scottish Government been saying today?
They are less than happy. I mean, these are the amendments to which Nick referred, laid in the Lords and handed to me in the last few seconds. They confirm that the UK Government is going ahead with the idea they would retain certain powers over, for example, agriculture, fisheries and the environment until those UK frameworks can be set up. The Scottish Government say they're not against the frameworks, but they're against these powers being retained in the initial phase by Westminster. Well, why so? Because these are EU elements of devolved powers like farming, etc. And the Scottish ministers say they belong here. They belong here at Holyrood. They say they have a principle to support. Well, you know, sometimes in politics, principle isn't enough. You have to have leverage. And the Scottish ministers have lost leverage with that Welsh deal. They no longer have backing from that quarter. Is there leverage then perhaps in convincing the public that this is a bit of chicanery by the UK government? These are deeply important powers, but I'm not sure there's traction with the public. I'm not sure they hear talk about farm subsidies and food labelling and immediately think to the barricades, aux armes, mes citoyens. No, I think that's not a route to go down. So I think ultimately you could be looking at a situation where the UK government go ahead with these amendments, go ahead with this legislation, this statute, without the consent of Holyrood. And that might cause an even bigger controversy.
Brian, thank you. It's 19 minutes to 7. A reminder of tonight's main story. A former resident of a Catholic children's home has told the Scottish Child Abuse Inquiry how he was forced to migrate to Australia aged 11. And still to come, making waves, the disused quarry to be transformed into a surfer's paradise. Within the next half hour, MSPs will approve plans for a new benefits system for Scotland. It'll give the Scottish Government control over 11 benefits worth more than £3 billion. Critics argue the social security bill isn't ambitious enough, but ministers say the system will ensure people get the benefits to which they're entitled. Here's our political correspondent, Andrew Kerr.
A lifetime spent in broadcasting and public relations, but now Dennis Dick has difficulty communicating.
I started having trouble with my voice. After tests confirmed that I had motor neuron disease.
Dennis receives attendance allowance to help pay for expenses. That's one benefit that's being devolved to Scotland. His digital voice takes over.
It is important that you get benefits right from the start and quickly, without a lot of fuss and effort.
Attendance allowance is one of 11 benefits coming north. They're worth more than £3 billion. The carers allowance will be the first to be paid in the summer at a higher rate. Lorraine Allen receives that. Her ex-partner has a brain injury. She's looked after him for 30 years.
The government promised, that they would increase the carers allowance, and they've done it. So that's fantastic. But I still think it's just a start to hopefully opening up new possibilities.
Just a start, maybe, but Labour say it's not enough.
From the very beginning, this bill has been almost empty. We've had to push the government at every step of the way to take forward progressive measures that would make a system more fairer, more humane, and give people who rely on the system more dignity.
The government says the bill is ambitious. Meanwhile, the Conservatives are concerned about a lack of preparation when it comes to delivery. The Minister says she's been working closely with the Department for Work and Pensions.
So far, we've had really good working relationships with our colleagues south of the border in government and in the DWP, and I'm confident that we'll work all of this through and we'll get to where we need to get to by the end of this Parliament.
MSPs will pass the bill shortly. More than 1 million Scots rely on these benefits. The Social Security Minister has admitted that her job will be in the line if there's a problem with delivery. Not 1 week of payments can be missed. Andrew Kerr, reporting Scotland, Holyrood.
The athlete Callum Hawkins says he doesn't want to be remembered as the guy who keeled over during the Commonwealth Games marathon. Speaking exclusively to BBC Scotland, he's revealed he has no recollection of getting up after his first fall in the Gold Coast event. But he also says he wants changes in the rules to ensure the safety of runners. He's been speaking to Jane Lewis.
10 days on from his Gold Coast exertions, and the aches and pains are fading.
Callum is collapsing. They really need to get someone to him quickly.
But the same can't be said for these distressing images. Still difficult to watch.
I remember coming around the corner and seeing the bridge, knowing that was about a mile and a half to go. I remember I just need to keep going, finish it, and I'll get the medal. And then next thing you know, my legs are almost switching off on me and going to jelly, and I'm starting to stumble. I remember falling off the side of the road and then trying my best to get back up, and then I don't remember anything after that. I don't remember actually physically getting up and running that extra 500 or so metres. Next thing I remember is being in an ambulance and getting whisked away.
When you were in the ambulance getting treatment, did you have any awareness or any recollection of what you had just been through at all?
Not really, I didn't. I remember the first thing I remember asking, did I win? Because I maybe thought, there might have been a chance that I went on autopilot and finished it. But nobody answered me, and I knew straight away. I was like, that's a no.
And now he's hit his head on the barrier. Somebody needs to come out.
It's more annoys me that I put myself in that I managed to put myself in that place, because if I hadn't, I would have won a medal. It just reminds me of the opportunity I missed. And I put 6 months in to try and get a medal, and to have it go away like that and to miss out in that manner it's quite annoying and frustrating.
There were people, spectators around you who didn't seem to be doing much.
Hope is just the fact that you don't know what to do. If you see that happen, it's just the shock of it, and you freeze. And then obviously that rule, you're like, if I touch him, do I get disqualified? It's a tough one.
Because of your situation, there was the spotlight really kind of was shone on the kind of rules for the marathon in terms of the onus very much on the athletes. Should those rules be changed?
I personally think so. I think the rule change needs to be maybe similar to boxing, but it's got to be done in a way where it's not, the athlete doesn't get pulled off too early. So maybe after 2 or 3 falls, or if I'm on the ground for 20 odd seconds and it's no sign that I'm getting up or getting better.
It hasn't put you off doing the marathons, I take it?
If anything's made me hungry, I need to make up for. I don't want to be known for the guy that keeled over because of the heat. I want to be known for the guy who's got a gold medal.
Oh, let's hope so. Callum Hawkins there. Now, one of the nominees for Scottish football's Player of the Year says he was close to quitting the game earlier this year. Kilmarnock's Chris Boyd is one of the 4 players on the shortlist, with the winner announced this weekend. More now from our sports reporter, Brian McLaughlin.
This is the 4 best players in Scotland, voted for by their fellow professionals. And the oldest nominee for Player of the Year says his career was saved by the arrival of new manager Steve Clarke back in October.
Round about the October time when the manager came in, I'd had enough. But I don't want to keep going over it, but if it wasn't for the manager, I wouldn't probably be playing football.
But the Killie striker has competition. Hibernian's John McGinn has established himself in the Scotland squad in his first year in the Premiership, and he hinted he may yet sign a new contract with the Easter Road club.
I've always been respectful of the fact that eventually I want to play at a higher level, but at the same time I've been respectful that Hibs is such a good club, and we've got such great facilities, brilliant coaches, and such a brilliant platform for someone like me to improve.
James Forrest is one of 2 Celtic players on the list, the winger tormenting many a defence this season.
The amount of trophies we've won with Celtic has been really successful since I've been there, and as I said, there's nothing better than winning cups and leagues and that, and playing in Champions League for Celtic. And I want to be here as long as possible, and as I said, keep working hard and try to make that happen.
The only previous winner on the list is Scott Brown. The Celtic captain has at least one high-profile supporter.
Scott Brown has been an amazing for him. Every time I've seen him, he's been one of the best players this season. And it's hard to look past the consistency of somebody like that.
The winner will be announced at a gala dinner this Sunday night in Glasgow. Brian McLaughlin, reporting Scotland.
Surf's up. It's the sort of call you hear in Hawaii or Bondi, but in a disused quarry west of Edinburgh. Maura Kinneborough can tell us more.
Artificial surfing's coming to Scotland. 1,000 waves an hour, machine made.
So you can get up to 100 in the lagoon at any one time.
Flooding this quarry will create a loch in a country park stoked with sports.
It's a £15 million project, so there's a lot of private investment going into this. We believe the rewards will come in various ways, one being the net economic impact to the local community, over £11 million per annum, and this has already been proven down in Wales where Surf Snowdonia are doing a roaring trade.
With only 1,500 regular surfers in Scotland, where's the demand?
There's more and more people interested in it, particularly with it becoming an Olympic sport in a few years' time. So all signs are that it's a great thriving community in Scotland, with Scotland providing a great backdrop for that already.
Surfing's no stranger to Scotland. In Thurso and around the coast, they've been riding the waves here for decades. More controlled waves will open the sport to others, including vulnerable youths.
This site will open up the opportunity for more and more young people to access services like the Wave Project, surfing therapy that just helps them overcome, the challenges they're facing in their lives through mental health. And really, at the moment, we're limited because of our sites we have out in East Lothian. But to have this right next to Edinburgh's capital will really open the door for hundreds, if not thousands, of young people to benefit from these services.
The Surf Centre promises other sports, building on Ratho and Scotland's reputation as an international adventure destination. Maura Kinneborough, reporting Scotland, Edinburgh.
Reminder, we'll have the weather later. Now, the Red Arrows display team are often part of national celebrations, whether it's the anniversary of the coronation or the opening of the Scottish Parliament. Well, now one of their Hawk jets has gone on permanent display at Scotland's National Museum of Flight in East Lothian, and it's expected to be a major draw for visitors. Cameron Buttle has been to see it.
A last bit of spit and polish for an old lady of the sky. And then it's chocks away for the final time. This is how most will want to remember her, carving shapes in the sky in stunning formations. Here, wowing the crowds, will Vic Greenock.
You can see behind you a beautiful Hawk, ex-Red One from the Red Arrows, the RAF aerobatic team, and it's an iconic aircraft. You've seen it flying around the world, around our own skies for many, many years since the Air Force transferred from that to Hawks for our aerobatic team aircraft, and it's a delight that this one is here in Scotland.
This version of the Hawk aircraft went out of service 6 years ago after decades with the RAF. This particular one also played a memorable role in Scottish history when it took to the skies with the call sign as Red One.
There are peaks in anybody's career, and for me, flying over, leading the fly past of the opening of the Scottish Parliament back in '99 was special, and it was done in this aeroplane together with Concorde. So it's tremendous to see this come together with Concorde.
Must be quite emotional to see the aircraft again.
Yeah, it's sort of stepping inside earlier on. You get the musty smell. They all smell like your auntie's front parlour. Yeah, it's fantastic to get back. Brings back so many fantastic memories.
That's about 90 degrees, so that's bang on, 3160.
The Red Arrows were known for their inch-perfect flying. It wouldn't do to be off here. Red One is positioned perfectly, line astern, as the pilot would say. So this is the final resting place for this Red Arrow, the very first one to ever go on display anywhere. And what a fitting setting. Two of the world's most iconic aircraft side by side once again. Concorde and Red One. Cameron Buttle, reporting Scotland at the National Museum of Flight.
And now we know it smells like your auntie's front parlour. Let's get the weather now from Judith.
Wonder how my front parlour smells. Thank you very much. A very good evening to you. Well, April wouldn't be April without that combination of sunshine and showers. You see some lovely Weather Watchers pictures of rainbows there in the background, a double rainbow here taken from Stirling. Into this evening, further showers to come, some heavy ones too through the central lowlands and across southern Scotland, but becoming dry with late sunshine across the east. We'll see those showers gradually becoming confined to western Scotland tonight and the far north as well. Still quite a brisk westerly wind driving those showers in. The wind's lighter across the Northern Isles, and overnight lows typically of around 4 to 5 Celsius, but down to close to freezing actually for inland parts of Aberdeenshire. So a dry sunny start across eastern Scotland, but showers from first light in the west, and those showers really get their act together and start to become more widespread as the day progresses. But I think for the Northern Isles, the showers will ease, just 1 or 2 for Shetland, light winds here, and few showers if any for Orkney as well. But they keep driving in across the north of the country for Aberdeenshire, some shelter towards Angus and Tayside and East Lothian and the eastern borders. They will feel cool in that westerly breeze. So in the west, there will always be fairly frequent showers, hail and thunder in the mix as well. Quite volatile at times actually, but they'll weak through fairly quickly on that brisk westerly wind, but it will feel cool if not fresh. So very little changes towards the end of the afternoon. Then tomorrow evening, the showers gradually die away. It leaves us with dry conditions during the overnight period. Quite lengthy clear spells, once again quite chilly in rural parts too. Then on Friday it starts off dry with good spells of sunshine from first light, but then those showers start to get going with lighter winds. These showers will be slow moving, heavy, possibly thundery as well. But in the south I think we'll see the fewest of the showers. The main focus will be across northern parts, and again those temperatures nothing to write home about at all. So we're on the north side of the jet stream, and that's going to invite colder air come the weekend, or cooler air certainly. We hold on to that sunshine and showers theme, but it will turn noticeably cooler as we approach the end of your month. That's a forecast.
Thank you, Judith. And now a reminder of tonight's main news. The Home Secretary, Amber Rudd, says she bitterly regrets only realising the extent of the Windrush scandal in recent months. The BBC has learned that the government was warned by Commonwealth countries about the impact of the immigration policy 2 years ago. And the Scottish Child Abuse Inquiry has heard how a former resident of the Sisters of Nazareth care home said he was forced to migrate to Australia aged 11. I'll be back at 10:30. Until then, from all the team, good evening.